He did it. President Trump issued a memo directing the Attorney General to declassify any information concerning the Obama administration's surveillance activities during the 2016 election. And I've said this before, but it bears repeating. The left's approach to abortion these days is turning people who have been on the fence about abortion or pro-choice into pro-life advocates and activists. And the Electoral College is in serious jeopardy. And I'm not really sure what we can do to prevent the end run around it that the left is getting closer and closer to pulling off. All this and more straight ahead. I'm Biggie, and this is the Liberty Cast. Before we get into the topics we're going to discuss, while we're enjoying ourselves on this long weekend, tomorrow is Memorial Day. This weekend, we honor the sacrifice that so many of our servicemen and women have made in the service to this great country. Now, I'm not going to wish my listeners a happy Memorial Day because Memorial Day is a day to honor those men and women. The families of those who have fallen, while surely proud of their son, daughter, sister, brother, husband, or wife who made that sacrifice, I can't say to them, Happy Memorial Day. What I will say, as we go into a moment of silence, is take solace in the fact that those men and women swore an oath to defend this country, paid the ultimate sacrifice in doing so, and will always have a special place in the hearts of patriotic Americans.
Welcome to the Liberty Cast, where we do our best to trigger the American communists with facts and common sense.
It's going to be a packed show today, folks, and I would be remiss if I did not mention off the top perhaps the biggest story this year. President Trump has given the Attorney General Bill Barr the authority to declassify documents related to the spying on his campaign and the origins of the investigation. I mean, the left has been telling us all along that Trump is engaging in criminal activity. He's conspiring with the Russians, etc. But it seems to me that someone guilty of that would do everything he possibly can to keep this information under wraps. He's been consistent all along. No collusion, no conspiracy. Yet the left has been moving the goalposts and changing the rules throughout this entire process. First it was collusion. Then it was obstruction. Now it's a cover-up. I've said before when they accuse Trump of being a racist that he's doing it wrong. Now Pelosi accuses him of a cover-up.
We do believe that it's important to follow the facts. We believe that no one is above the law, including the President of the United States, and we believe that the President of the United States is engaged in a cover-up.
Now, would someone guilty of these crimes actually ask for investigations into his team, as I believe he did with Comey before he fired him? It might have been Rosenstein. I'm a little fuzzy on that right now. But would he declassify documents that would undoubtedly implicate him in such crimes? I seriously doubt it. Now, we'll see when these documents finally come out, but I suspect that all this information is going to do a lot more damage to the leftists who have been trying to destroy him than to Trump. Again, we'll see. I'm not going to get too much further into it right now. I mean, there's a lot of information out there. You can look at Dan Bongino's website. You can check out Byron York's work. A whole bunch of other people have done a lot of really good investigative work into this, and the information is out there. So that's where I'm going to leave that right now until we have more information, until some of these things get declassified. But it's coming, and I hope the left is prepared to reap the whirlwind. So let's move on. I really didn't want to get into this again, but I felt like I had to bring something up. With all of the recent talk about abortion, I'm seeing post after post on all of my feeds where People are talking about supporting a woman's right to choose, talking about women's bodily autonomy, and no man should have a say in what a woman does with her body, etc., etc. As much as we've talked about abortion and that I'm pro-life, I don't think I've ever actually articulated why. I think you probably know based on what I have said in past shows, but I'm just going to spell it out for you. First off, women already have the right to choose. And this is going to ruffle some feathers, but women already have the right to choose. They can choose not to have sex. They can choose to use birth control. Or they can choose to keep the baby. Those are all things they can choose to do with their bodies. And once they become pregnant, the baby is not a parasite. The baby is not just a clump of cells. The baby is a tiny human being with their own distinct DNA separate and apart from the mother. Now, for a group of people who claim to be all about science, I really don't understand how they can go so roundly reject the science of reproduction. And even if you buy into the notion that the pregnancy is just a clump of cells, cells are alive. You learn that in 6th grade biology. So even if you think that it's okay to kill a baby in the earliest stages of pregnancy, it doesn't take long before that quote unquote clump of cells starts to look like a human being. Look at any fetal development chart and you'll see just how quickly the fertilized egg divides and becomes a human being. And some will say that as soon as that egg is fertilized, it's a human being. It wasn't that long ago when being pro-choice meant that if a woman found out she was pregnant at 6 weeks or 8 weeks tops, that it would have been considered acceptable, for lack of a better word, to have an abortion. It was understood that it wasn't an ideal situation, but it was understandable, and people fell back on the whole thing. Well, I'm not going to tell a woman what to do with her body. I fell into that camp back then. But I also didn't really know, A, just how much a baby had developed by then, and B, what an abortion actually entailed. And once I started educating myself and getting a specific sense about fetal development and how quickly that happened, my view changed. Once I found out exactly how an abortion was performed, my view changed even more. My thinking evolved in the subject, as the leftists like to say when they take a different view of a subject based on how it will benefit them politically. But even pro-choice people saw the tragedy in abortion back then. Not anymore, though. Anti-life advocates are now ready to kill a baby right up until the moment of birth. As I said back in the day, 6 or 8 weeks was acceptable because people were not really educated about what was happening. But we know that at 6 weeks, you can hear a baby's heartbeat. At 8 weeks, lungs have started to develop and neural pathways are forming. By 10 weeks, limbs and fingers and toes are unmistakable. And as if there was any doubt before that, this is very clearly a baby human being. This is not the mother's body. It's a separate human being who, despite what Hillary Clinton said, has constitutional rights.
When or if does an unborn child have constitutional rights?
Well, under our laws currently, that is not something that exists. The unborn person doesn't have constitutional rights.
So now that we know in as little as 10 weeks, the baby looks like a baby, a very small, about the size of a Roma tomato, but still a baby. Fast forward another 30 weeks, and the anti-life crowd are still saying that it's okay to kill this child. Keep in mind that they're They're flouting all of the usual caveats about feeling pain and viability because babies can feel pain and live outside the mother's womb as early as 24 weeks. And as medical science continues to advance, I am certain that we will be looking at viability in the 18 to 20 week range. We've already seen a few cases where a 20-week-old fetus has managed to live outside of the mother's womb. But now, having said all of that, if you listen to Ralph Northam, I'm sure you all remember him. He's the racist that not only refused to shake my dad's hand during the lieutenant governor's race, but he also describes in some detail how killing a newborn would happen.
The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mothers.
And that was on camera, not just audio, but video as well. So we can't come back and say it wasn't him, like he did with the picture of him in the Klan getup. I mean, just ridiculous. Now, I'm not going to list all of the horrific things that abortionists do to babies because it is horrific, especially when you see videos of the ultrasound of the procedure. And you can see the baby clearly fighting to stay alive. But let's review. I am pro-life because science tells us that life begins at conception. That life is separate and distinct from the mother, and as such has rights and deserves protection. This abortion discussion deserves a lot more time than this, but there are a few other things I want to get to before I get you out of here. So my rationale for being pro-life is based on some pretty basic principles. And I think it's been well established that the left has no principles. And that fact right there dovetails pretty nicely into our next topic, which is the philosophy of the left. The left hates. Their entire philosophy, platform, everything they stand for, if that's even really a thing. But it's based on hatred. Hatred for children in the abortion discussion. Hatred for our way of life, as evidenced by their desire to have the government take over the entire economy. Hatred for our sovereignty, as evidenced by their open border policies and desire to basically hand over the country to illegal aliens. They hate anything that gets in the way of their pursuit of power. And the Electoral College is just one of those things. This is a story that has not been widely reported yet, but there is a movement afoot to do an end run around the Constitution with the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. Now, for those of you who are unaware, this compact is an agreement between a number of states where they award their electors to the winner of the national popular vote. Now, for those of you who are not aware, and that includes you leftists, in fact, that group is probably only consists of leftists, but the president is not elected by a national popular vote. We are not a democracy. This country was founded as a constitutional representative republic. It's not a national election every 4 years. It's 50 state elections plus the District of Columbia. But why did the framers design it this way? One of the reasons they created the Electoral College was to actually mitigate against the very thing that these leftists are trying to implement with this compact. Direct popular vote of the president. Mob rule, which is essentially what a direct democracy is. They did not want there to be a possibility of a tyrant rising to power by manipulating the masses. The Electoral College was created to thwart such a development by awarding the electoral votes to a more suitable candidate. And another reason that they designed the Electoral College is so that states with large populations and population centers cannot overwhelm and impose their will on smaller states. Like with abortion laws or gun laws. And this is a scenario that we find ourselves in right now. New York, California, Florida, Texas. Texas, thankfully, is still red. But with all the people fleeing socialist hotbeds like California and Massachusetts and bringing their ridiculousness here, it could be devastating to conservatism nationwide. But those heavily populated areas that I mentioned, like California and New York and Massachusetts, lean overwhelmingly to the left. Some places like New York City have populations that dwarf cities in Midwestern states. If we go to a national popular vote, or if this compact reaches the 270 electoral votes needed, New York could impose their baby murdering ways on Alabama, who clearly values the lives of babies. Or California could impose their draconian anti-constitutional gun laws on Oklahoma. It's a scary proposition that is happening with this compact. Now, right now, they are at 190 electoral votes. Now, when this first started, it was one of those novelty, far leftist notions that no one really thought would happen. But now it's looking more and more like a possibility. I mean, they're still going to have to persuade some red states to go that way, but it's not as far-fetched as I would have thought a year or so ago. Of course, this is just another manifestation of their hatred for our Constitution, which prevents them from acquiring the power that they so desire. So instead of trying to persuade the American people to their side with actual arguments and ideas that make sense, they change the rules or move the goalposts, as Mary Catherine Ham put it a few weeks ago. They want to make it so that the coasts control the elections, and to hell with the rest of the country, because we're too stupid to understand that they know better than us how we should live. And they will destroy every sacred institution and tradition that we hold dear. Now, as detestable as it is, it's not illegal. It does completely violate what the framers intended. But the compact is non-binding and voluntary. To me, it's a dicey constitutional situation. But Article 2, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution gives the states the authority to determine how their electoral votes will be awarded. And now we find ourselves in this situation because we voted these people into office. And these are the consequences. All right, y'all, we're going to take a quick break, but we have a whole lot more for you on the other side. Remember when the left was telling us that children were being ripped from their families' arms and held in cages at the border? And remember when we told them that we have no idea, we have no way of knowing whether or not these kids were actually the children of the adults presenting themselves at the border? They told us we were stupid. We were stupid conspiracy theorists for even suggesting such a thing. But now we find out that it's true. DNA tests are proving that fake families are showing up at the border. So if we detain these children, separate them, are we really ripping them from their mother's arms if the family is not really a family? Of course we were right. The investigative branch of ICE, Homeland Security Investigations, conducted an investigation and found through rapid DNA testing that in the two test areas of El Paso and the Rio Grande Valley, there is a 30% rate of fraud. Now, between mid-April and May 10th, HSI special agents interviewed 562 family units that they suspected might be fake throughout the various Border Patrol checkpoints. and nearly half of them, 48%, were determined to be fake. In 2014, less than 1% of all men apprehended at the border in the Rio Grande Valley sector had a child with them. Now, according to the chief Border Patrol agent in the Rio Grande Valley sector, Rodolfo Carish, that number has ballooned and is now at 50%. Half of all the men apprehended at the border in that sector have a child with them. From what I can tell, this is pretty much just a pilot program right now, but it needs to be expanded and made a standard part of the process when processing family units at the border. It will curb this trend of smugglers or run-of-the-mill illegals falsely claiming children to be their own. As of now, they know that traveling with children basically paves the way for them to enter this country. But this is what happens when you incentivize people coming here with free stuff: healthcare, education, housing, etc. They get more than our vets do. And Joe Biden actually had the nerve to say that we have an obligation to do this.
Look, I think that anyone who is in a situation where they're in need of health care, regardless of whether they're documented or undocumented, we have an obligation to see that they're cared for. That's why I think we need more clinics around the country.
What about the obligation to our own people? Even Cher is saying that this is too much now. She's even citing the homeless population in her city of Los Angeles. As long as there are homeless veterans on the street, helping illegal aliens do anything except go back to their home country should be the last thing we worry about. An illegal alien in Phoenix is being charged with aggravated assault and sexual conduct with a minor for impregnating an 11-year-old girl. What about our obligation to protect her from that predator? We have enough predators in this country already. We don't need to be importing anymore. We need to shut it down. We need to shut the border down. And I'm actually a bit disappointed that the president hasn't been able to close the border yet. I'm of the opinion that there needs to be a moratorium placed on all immigration. We're full. Now, I know a lot of people think that we need legal immigration. We don't. What we need right now is to concentrate on putting our own house in order before we allow anyone and everyone from these other countries to come in and benefit from what we have going on here that's so special. All right, moving on. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The state of Oregon is making a move to expand the list of people who should not be allowed to own guns. The Oregon State Senate just passed a bill by a vote of 25-3, making it illegal for domestic abusers to own and keep firearms. Now, I think we can all agree that a man who beats his wife or girlfriend should not be allowed to own a gun, obviously. But on Thursday, the Oregon Senate passed this bill along party lines. Now, it's not yet up on the Oregon legislature's website, but from what I have gathered, it is my understanding that there's a huge problem with this bill. The problem is that the bill targets domestic abusers who are not married to or living with their victims. Now, this is important because when you're married or living with your partner or spouse, there's evidence of that relationship. Without this evidence, there's literally nothing stopping someone from making up a story about a man that they're dating when they have an argument or have a bad breakup, or even someone they're not dating but just don't like, or telling authorities that a man is stalking them. And I don't want to hear this nonsense about how no woman would ever do that. Please. People can be evil. Any perceived slight could trigger someone to fabricate a story. It's happened. Now, this bill will likely get signed by the governor because who's really going to come to the defense of a domestic abuser or stalker? But once you buy into the notion that these people can have their rights stripped away with no evidence behind it, it becomes easier and easier to add to that list. It is a classic slippery slope argument. A little further south in California, Senator Hannah Beth Jackson has introduced Senate Bill 55, which has been dubbed the Minority Report Bill. Now, those of you familiar with the movie understand exactly where this is headed, because this bill makes certain misdemeanor offenses carry with them a 10-year prohibition on gun possession. Now, to my astonishment, Governor Moonbeam actually vetoed a similar bill and said that he didn't think it was necessary to bar gun ownership on the basis of crimes that are non-felonies, non-violent, and do not involve the misuse of a firearm. A rare moment of lucidity from the former governor. But this bill is coming from the state that is trying to decriminalize drug use, go easy on nonviolent drug offenders, but at the same time wants to punish someone preemptively from exercising their constitutional right to defend themselves. Now, one of the misdemeanors that is included in this bill is DUI. Now, on the surface, barring someone who's convicted of drunk driving from owning a firearm seems like a decent idea. Again, just like in Oregon, barring someone who is accused of domestic violence seems like a decent idea. But again, if you just dig a little deeper or even just think about it for a second, you realize that this law most likely would only affect people who legally own firearms. It will do nothing to stop those who couldn't give a damn about following the law. Now, Senator Jackson cites science as the backbone of this bill and says that it will stop the people more likely to use firearms from obtaining them. I can't tell you how many times we've been over this. Somebody who wants to get their hands on a gun to do ill is going to do it. And they are not going to go down to your local sporting goods store to get it. So how about just enforcing the laws that are on the books? How about going back to a mandatory sentence for crimes committed with firearms? Something that actually targets the perpetrators of gun violence rather than law-abiding citizens. Now, I know that citing people convicted of DUI is not exactly the best argument for gun rights, but here's the thing. Legal gun owners are among the most law-abiding citizens in this country and less likely to be convicted of such a crime in the first place. But people make mistakes. Imagine a 21-year-old out drinking for the first time on their birthday. They don't realize how drunk they might actually be, and they jump in their car to drive home. If they get stopped and then subsequently convicted, they'll be 31 before they can legally own a gun. And in the state of California, do you really think that 10 years is going to be the end of it? Do you really think that 10 years, they'll say, okay, you've been clean since then, so you can now exercise your Second Amendment rights? No. They are going to use that. They're going to hold that over their head, and that person will never be able to exercise their rights as an American citizen, no matter how clean they've been since that initial mistake. But just so we're clear, I am not defending drunk driving. I am not defending stalking or domestic abuse by any stretch of the imagination. All I'm saying is, instead of looking for ways to preemptively ban citizens from exercising their rights, how about take that energy and use it to go after the people that we know are committing the crimes and perpetrating the gun violence. It's very easy to figure out. The ones that have been convicted of crimes involving firearms is a really, really good place to start. I have a lot more I wanted to get to, but unfortunately, we are out of time. But I want to thank you all for listening. Please subscribe and leave a review. You can find us on iTunes, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Spotify. You can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. It's at The Liberty Cast on all 3 of those platforms. Now, while we honor those who sacrificed this Memorial Day, do enjoy your day and have a couple of cold ones, but drink responsibly and don't put yourself in a position like the one we just discussed. But until next time, keep your head on a swivel and stay safe, everybody.